about America's Heroes Group Roundtable with Union AFGE Local 789. January is cervical health awareness and National Blood Donor Month. And hopefully you folks are giving blood. We all need to do that, for sure. And with us on our live line, we are pleased to have our guest, Ann Lindgren, Air Force veteran and president of AFGE Local 789 with over 18 years as a federal employee. How are you, Miss Lindgren?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good, good. Certainly happy to have you. And you tell us about before we get into the issue with the federal unions, tell us about your experience in the service as a military.
Oh, in my Air Force service?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I was active duty between the years of 1995 and 1999. I was primarily in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is a ICBM base. We had basically nuclear missiles throughout Wyoming and the surrounding area. And my job was, I was a public health medic, and so I did a lot of the stuff that wasn't taken care of in the other parts of the medical service. So I would always jokingly say we got all the stuff that other medical people didn't want to do. So I did everything from communicable disease tracking to safety briefings to I did a lot of food sanitation stuff. And then in 1998, I was deployed to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in support of Operation Southern Watch, which was at the time the no-fly zone after the Gulf War. So spent 4 or 5 months over there, came back home, and finished up my active duty service, and luckily came home in one piece, and yeah.
That's right.
Kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Then after that, what did you do, Miss Lindgren?
Well, my whole point that I really wanted to go in the military because it was kind of my way out of going nowhere in life, to be honest with you. So the whole point of me going into the military was to get some educational benefits. So after I came back home to Illinois, I promptly started school. I went to school for 6 years, finished up with a master's in clinical psychology, and then my first job actually was working for community mental health, and then very quickly I was picked up by the Department of the Navy and up at Naval Station Great Lakes. Worked there for a few years in their substance abuse rehabilitation program as a substance abuse counselor, and then transferred to Jesse Brown at VA in Chicago in 2010.
What was the last thing? You did what?
I transferred to Jesse Brown VA.
Oh yeah, okay,
Medical Center.
Sure.
Yeah, in
oh
2010.
Yeah. They do great work.
Yes, we do.
Yes, you sure do. I don't know whether you know it or not, but we have some of your people on quite often, and of course we go over there. We've done shows from there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was on one of your shows, I believe, late last year with our last director, Mark McGill.
Yeah,
we were talking
sure.
about
Right.
the VA Mission Act, I believe it was. Yep.
Well, that's great. So, what is the discussion about today, Miss Lindgren?
Okay, so a lot of people. I feel like there's so much going on right now in the federal government that it's really hard to keep up with, everything that's happening, and it's very disheartening as well. So I think it's difficult for people to want to keep up with things. But today I want to talk a little bit about what's currently happening in the labor side of federal government for federal unions, and really, if you would indulge me. Just a little bit of time at the beginning here. There's some history that I think I need to kind of discuss before really getting into the meat and potatoes of what's happening today. So a little federal union labor history here. In 1978, the Federal Service Labor Management Relations statute, it's a mouthful, was signed into law by President Carter. And in essence, this is the law that gives federal unions, management officials, and employees their labor rights. So, in a nutshell, at that time, our government believed that a unionized federal workforce was in the public interest. And so with the enactment of this law, basically what happened then is that made any unionized federal agency an open shop, meaning that union officials have to represent any federal employee in our unit, whether they are dues paying or not. And this is very different than private unions. Private unions do not do this. They will only represent dues paying members because, nothing is free.
Right.
And representation obviously can cost money. So the trade-off for the federal workforce was, okay, since you have to represent people who are potentially not paying you to represent them, we will give you time to do that. And that's what we call official time. So basically, official time is the time that we are given by the law to do representational work for the people for the federal employees who we represent. So why is this information important? Well, in May of 2018, President Trump issued 3 executive orders. I refer to them as EOs. So if I say EOs, that's what I'm talking about, executive orders. And each of these executive orders basically attempt to strip the federal unions of our ability to represent federal employees. So specifically, the executive orders take away our ability to prepare or pursue grievances against the agencies we work in. They also severely limit the amount of official time that we are using, and it also makes it difficult to request official time. So there's another executive order that actually stops the long practice what we call progressive discipline. When we're disciplining employees, we use progressive discipline, meaning they can't just be fired. You have to try to work with the employee and discipline them, not punish them. It also strips management's responsibility in supporting employees and in improving their work performance. So if a manager sees that there's an employee who's struggling and knows that there's things that they can do to help this person do a better job, they are no longer obligated to do that. And so a lot of these, a lot of other things in the executive orders effectively make federal employees employ at will employees, which we traditionally have not been. And another one, which is another big problem, another one of these executive orders does not allow us the use of agency space to meet with employees any longer for free. So we've been able to do that in the past. Like I have an office at Jesse Brown where, people can come and meet with me, and the agency provides me with that space for free. So getting further into the issue here, AFGE is the largest federal union, and we represent employees throughout all these different agencies throughout the government. So the EPA, the VA, Social Security Administration, TSA. And so because each of these agencies have very specialized labor issues or different things within the law that apply specifically to those agencies, AFGE has broken itself down into councils. And the councils bargain our contract at every agency. So this is important to understand because at the same time the executive orders were signed, every agency in the federal government that had a union contract demanded reopening our contracts for bargaining. And the reason for this is because most of our contracts had agreements about providing us space for free. We had agreements of exactly what was a reasonable amount of official time that we were to be given, and the use of progressive discipline, and a lot of these things that these executive orders specifically target. So, am I painting a picture here?
You certainly are. No, it is a lot of information. Yeah.
And I get why, when I talk to people about this stuff, a lot of times people start to glaze over, and I understand because it's like, okay, there's so many things going on at once that this is what people need to understand here is that this is a very targeted attack.
Why is this happening?
Well, let me get into that a little further. Before we discuss this, I still have more information to give you.
Okay.
So why is it happening? Well, many federal agencies currently are being managed by individuals who have been appointed by Trump and who are specifically moving their agencies in the direction of privatization or benefiting corporate interests even further. So, for example, I don't know if you know who Betsy DeVos is. She's the head of the Department of Education. But basically, in a nutshell, she is a billionaire who benefits from the massive student loan debt in this country. She's benefiting from keeping people in debt for student loans, and she's the head of the Department of Education. And Andrew Wheeler at the EPA, he's another great example. Prior to his appointment at the EPA, he was a lobbyist for the energy industry. So I could go on and on with examples of how Trump has appointed people who are really interested to all these different departments, who have histories of working against what these departments stand for and are interested in privatizing these industries. So the VA is no different. So once these executive orders were signed, many of these agencies began illegally enforcing the executive orders and began kicking union officials out of their offices, refusing to allow them the use of official time, basically told them, we've got these executive orders, get out, despite the fact that their contracts were still in force. So that's why I say they were illegally following these executive orders. And again, it's another really important point to make. So luckily at Jesse Brown, where I'm at, this has not happened yet. And I attribute that, honestly, to having some pretty level-headed and smart people, management folks, like our last director, Mark McGill, in place and understanding that, hey, wait a second, kicking you guys out isn't going to be the best thing to do for the long run. And I remember sitting down with him at the table and saying, look, these executive orders, AFGE is fighting them, and we believe they're illegal, and they're going through the court system. And, honestly, if you direct me back to patient care, I'll have to go to patient care. But I really don't think that's the best thing right now, because this fight is not over. And if you put me back in patient care, in 2 weeks from now, we win in court and there's a stay on enforcing these executive orders, and I go back to the union, and my caseload of patients are up in the air, and, so on and so forth. So we were able to come to an agreement that, okay, yeah, this isn't the best. Let's wait and see, what the courts say about this, how all this settles, so on and so forth. However, at other VAs, unfortunately, friends of mine in the labor side of the house, people were kicked out. People were told, you're going back to patient care in 2 days. And at other agencies, this was happening. People were showing up to work and they were locked out of their union offices. I mean, it was just a mess.
Now, that's in other places?
Yeah, that did happen at other places,
okay.
Yes. So although it didn't happen for me at Jesse Brown VA, it will likely happen soon. And the reason why I say that is because, as I mentioned earlier, our contract is in negotiation. And the Department of Veterans Affairs has recently declared bypass on our contract negotiation. The National VA Council, the council I mentioned earlier, has filed, I believe, 4 or 5 national grievances against the Department of Veterans Affairs, arguing that they broke the law by failing to bargain in good faith. So those are being played out right now through the grievance process and arbitration process. But nonetheless, it sounds like the Department of Veterans Affairs is likely going to go ahead and press forward in expecting us to follow these executive orders. And so what's happening throughout the government with other contracts that are being negotiated is the Trump administration's MO is that once they reopen these contracts, the play they seem to be engaging in is to run out the time that we agree to bargain with them in our ground rules in order to get the contract to something called the Federal Services Impasse Panel. And so the plot thickens, right? So the Federal Services Impasse Panel is a panel that is staffed by political appointees, and they can make a unilateral binding decision on any contract that's brought forth to them. So what's happened already throughout the federal government, I believe Social Security Administration, this happened through EPA, a couple other places, where the government said, okay, we're at impasse, let's take this to the Federal Services Impasse Panel, and a gutted contract was given back to the union. And the interesting thing about most of what these gutted contracts look like is they closely resemble the things that I was talking about that are already in the executive orders. So why is this important? Why is all this important? And what is important to understand about this is, firstly, AFGE's stance is that the executive orders represent a constitutional crisis and that they are an attempt by the president to circumvent the law that was passed in 1978. You know, I talked about that probably about 20 minutes ago.
Sure.
So remember,
yes, important.
These were rights, right? These were rights that were given to us by law in 1978, and now through the stroke of a pen, the president can just destroy, 30 plus years of precedent in this law, precedent of following this law and our understanding of following this law through a stroke of the pen. Which I don't know how you feel about that. That's pretty dang scary.
Yeah, I think you know.
Yeah. I mean, this is very scary.
Yep.
So secondly, the federal work. The other thing to think about here is, I've been saying this for years. The federal workforce is really the last bastion of unionized employees in this country, and not coincidentally, the last bastion of solidly middle class workers in this country. Now, thankfully, over the last couple of years, we're starting to see this change. But, unions have been in decline in this country for 30 and 40 years. So, I think that's an important thing for people to know and understand. The folks who are in this administration are not dumb. They know that unionized employees are better paid employees. They have better benefits. And these folks are not interested in supporting labor. They're interested in pursuing their corporate agenda and furthering the income inequality that we're seeing in this country that I believe is going to destroy this country if we don't turn it around. So that's something that's important to understand. And thirdly, unionized federal employees serve as a layer of accountability at our agencies. We speak out about, we're whistleblowers, we speak out about wrongdoing and fraud, and we're the ones who are making noise about the privatization efforts, the ongoing privatization efforts that are happening in each of our agencies. So, for example, at Jesse Brown, we've had rallies about the outrageous number of vacancies throughout the VA system, vacancies that, they contribute to veterans having to wait for care, they contribute to staff burnout. Currently, I believe the VA nationwide is down 49,000 jobs. These are vacancies. And AFGE has been at front and center confronting Wilkie about what is your plan to address these vacancies. And he has said, I don't have a plan. I'm not interested in that at this point. He's more interested in making sure that these executive orders play out and that our contract is gutted. That's what he's interested in. That's where he's shown that his support is. So, once the executive orders are enforced, the union's ability to represent and protect employees is going to be severely curtailed. So, that's kind of it's a nutshell.
yeah, really. At this point, man, what should my listeners do?
Well, I tell everybody I talk to about this that it is important to call your representatives and your congresspeople, and and really give them an earful about how they feel about these things. how they feel about the way federal employees are being treated, how they feel about, VA potentially and other agencies potentially being privatized. These are the people pushing this agenda. These are the people who, you talk about, let's say, Medicare for all, for example. And, they cry, oh, no, we can't afford that. But yet they can, push through a $7 billion or $1 million defense budget. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just, so people need to be engaged politically, because our representatives, if they don't hear from people, they're going to hear from somebody else who has a different agenda. So that's the best advice I would give anybody. If you're a veteran and you've received care at the VA, write and tell your story about the care that you received at the VA, and how that's helped you. That's the best advice I can give.
Sounds like the thing to do. Absolutely. We certainly need to do that. I want to say you've done a great job in explaining what the circumstance is, Ann Lindgren.
Thank you.
Yes, you have. And, of course, being a Air Force veteran, makes a lot of difference, too. You know exactly what that's all about.
Right. You wouldn't expect any less.
That's right. That's right. I certainly agree with that. And, of course, you being the president of AFGE Local 789, 18 years as a federal employee. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's been great. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, because are people joining you? Are you getting a lot of participation?
Of members?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got a fairly solid amount of members. There's room for more, and there's always room for members who are not just paying their dues, but actually, for any of your listeners, if you're a union member, paying your dues is only part of it.
Right.
Being actively engaged in your union, and whether you're just showing up for your meetings, or whether you're helping to plan a rally, or just talking to other people, about organizing, this is the labor movement in the United States is at a crucial time, and we will win or we will fail collectively, and we need all hands on deck.
I got you. I love the way you say that. All hands on deck. Again.
Maybe reference.
Yeah. Again, is there a way people can reach you?
Sure, they can reach me. I am at Jesse Brown VA, and I can be reached at 312-569-5597.
597. 312-569-5597.
That's correct.
Thank you. Great interview, and keep it up. All right?